All right, so today we're diving into a story that you probably think you know, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
bet you don't know the full story. We're talking about the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the one where a woman supposedly got millions just because she spilled coffee on herself?
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Well, we're going to uncover what really went down and
Okay.
hopefully see if the truth is as simple as that punchline you always hear.
It's a case that really highlights how public perception can sometimes miss the mark.
For sure. So let's set the scene.
All right.
Our sources told the story of Spella Liebeck. She was a 79-year-old grandmother,
Okay.
and she bought a cup of coffee at a McDonald's drive-thru
Mm-hmm.
back in 1992.
Okay.
Her grandson was driving her, and his car didn't have cup holders.
I see.
So she put the coffee cup between her knees so she could add creamer, and
Oh, no.
yeah, you guessed it, the coffee spilled.
And I'm guessing the consequences were a lot worse than just a little mess.
Oh, way worse. Liebet ended up with third-degree burns on a large part of her body.
Wow.
She even needed skin grafts and had to stay in the hospital for 8 days.
8 days in the hospital. That's definitely not your typical coffee spill.
Right. One of the things that really surprised me when I was reading about this case was the temperature of the coffee.
Oh, yeah. How hot was it?
Well, McDonald's policy at the time was to serve its coffee between 180 and 190 degrees Fahrenheit.
Seriously, that's crazy hot. Most homebrewed coffee is more like 135 to 140 degrees.
Exactly. It's a huge difference, and it really makes you wonder why they would serve it so hot.
You would think they would have some safety concerns.
You would think. Now, what's interesting is that Liebeck wasn't initially trying to get rich or anything.
Really? So what was she after?
She just wanted McDonald's to cover her medical expenses, which were about $10,000.
That sounds pretty reasonable considering the extent of her injuries.
Right. So did McDonald's just pay up?
Well, not exactly. They actually offered her a measly $800.
$800? You're kidding me, for third-degree burns?
I know, right? It's hard to believe.
What were they thinking?
And here's the thing. It turns out that McDonald's had already received over 700 reports of people getting burned by their coffee.
Seriously, 700? And they still hadn't changed their policy?
Nope. It seems like they weren't really prioritizing customer safety.
So after they offered her that ridiculous $800, Liebrick decided to take legal action, right?
Exactly. She hired a lawyer, and they presented evidence of McDonald's negligence.
Okay, and how did the jury respond to that?
Well, they definitely felt that McDonald's was in the wrong.
I'm guessing they didn't just award her the $10,000 in medical expenses.
No, they didn't. The jury awarded Liebeck $200,000 in compensatory damages, which was later reduced to $160,000 because they found her partially responsible for the spill.
Okay.
But here's where things get really interesting. They also awarded her a whopping $2.7 million in punitive damages.
$2.7 million? That's a lot of money. What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, the punitive damages were intended to send a strong message to McDonald's and other big companies.
What kind of message?
A message about taking responsibility for their actions and putting safety over profits. And get this, the jury calculated the amount to be the equivalent of 2 days' worth of McDonald's coffee sales.
Wait, they based it on how much coffee McDonald's sells in 2 days?
Yep, it was a pretty powerful statement. They were basically saying, you need to feel this financially if you're going to make a change.
That's a pretty bold move. I mean, it does seem a little harsh, but I can see their point.
It's a reminder that juries have the power to hold corporations accountable.
I guess so, but didn't the judge end up lowering the punitive damages anyway?
Yeah, you're right. The judge reduced it to $480,000, which is still a pretty big chunk of change.
It is, but what about the final amount that Liebeck actually received?
That's actually remained confidential to this day.
So even though the amount was reduced, it was still a win for Liebeck, right?
Definitely, and it was a definite blow to McDonald's reputation.
For sure. But things didn't end there, did they? The media got a hold of this story and things got kind of crazy.
Oh yeah, the media frenzy was something else. We'll have to talk about that when we come back.
Definitely. Okay, so before we went on that tangent, we were talking about how even though McDonald's had all these reports of people getting burned by their coffee, they just kept serving it super hot.
Right.
And then a jury decided that they were being negligent and awarded Stella Liebeck all this money to try to get them to change their ways.
Yeah, and that's when the media really jumped on the story.
Oh yeah, the media coverage of this case was insane.
It was a total frenzy. Liebeck basically became the poster child for frivolous lawsuits.
Yeah. I remember hearing jokes about her when I was a kid. Everyone was calling her the hot coffee lady.
Right, all the late-night talk shows were making fun of her, and the headlines were all like, woman wins millions over spilled coffee.
Looking back, it's kind of crazy how much the media twisted the story.
Totally. They focused on this idea that it was absurd to sue over spilled coffee.
Yeah, they made it sound like she was just some greedy lady trying to get rich.
Exactly. They completely downplayed how bad her injuries were and how McDonald's had been ignoring this problem for years.
It's amazing how a few catchy headlines can totally change how people see something.
It's a good reminder to always look beyond the headlines and try to get the full story.
For sure. But this case also became a big part of the debate about tort reform.
Oh, yeah.
which I gotta be honest, I don't really know much about. Can you explain what that is?
Sure, tort reform is basically about changing the laws around lawsuits.
Okay.
A lot of times it's about trying to limit how much money people can get in lawsuits, especially in cases where someone's been injured because of a company's negligence.
So some people thought this case was a good example of why I need tort reform.
Right, they argued that the system was too easy to exploit and that juries were giving out way too much money in damages.
But wasn't the jury's decision in the Liebig case based on evidence that McDonald's had messed up?
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't just a random decision. They looked at all those previous burn reports and decided that McDonald's was knowingly putting their customers at risk.
So even though Liebig was being made fun of in the media, the jury was actually taking her case seriously.
Exactly. And their decision did have some positive consequences.
Like what?
Well, after the lawsuit, McDonald's finally lowered the serving temperature of their coffee.
Oh, wow. So they actually made a change.
They did, which kind of proves that the jury was right to hold them accountable.
It's crazy to think that all of this happened because of a cup of coffee.
Right. But this case really isn't just about coffee. It's about corporate responsibility and consumer safety.
It's also about how much power the media has to shape public opinion.
Totally. And it's a reminder that we need to be careful about what we believe and always try to look at things from different perspectives.
That's some good advice. So where do we go from here? This case happened a long time ago, but it still feels relevant today.
It does. It makes you wonder how much has really changed.
Yeah, like how do we balance personal responsibility with corporate accountability?
That's a tough question, and it's one that we're still grappling with today.
For sure. This case also makes you think about how public perception can sometimes overshadow the truth.
Absolutely. Even when a jury makes a decision based on evidence, public opinion can still sway the way people see things.
That's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is. It's a reminder that we need to be critical thinkers and not just blindly accept what we hear or read.
So what are some key takeaways from all of this? I mean, the McDonald's coffee case is obviously way more than just a funny story about someone suing over a coffee spill.
It is. It's a story about corporate responsibility, consumer safety, and the power of perception.
And it reminds us that there's always more to the story than what we see on the surface.
Exactly. We need to be curious and dig deeper and not be afraid to question the narratives that we're given.
Exactly. Don't just take the headlines at face value. Do your own research and think for yourself.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's a lesson that applies to pretty much everything, not just this case.
For sure.
So I hope that this deep dive has given you a new perspective on the McDonald's coffee case.
You too. It's a story that's often misunderstood.
And maybe next time you hear someone making a joke about the hot coffee lady, you'll remember that there's a lot more to the story than meets the eye.
Hopefully.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the McDonald's coffee case. Until next time, stay curious. This case also makes you think about, like, where's the line between personal responsibility and holding a company accountable? You know what I mean? Like, sure, maybe Liebig could have been a little more careful with that coffee, but shouldn't McDonald's have served it at a temperature that wouldn't cause, third-degree burns if it's spilled?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's a question that comes up a lot, actually.
Really?
Yeah, especially in cases about, like, consumer products and services.
Oh, I see.
It's kind of this ongoing debate about where we draw the line between, like, individual choices and the responsibility of companies to make things that are safe.
Makes sense. And it feels like it's even more relevant these days with, like, so many new products and services coming out all the time.
Totally. And then you've got the whole issue of public perception, too.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Like, in this case, Liebig had these horrific injuries, and the jury sided with her and said McDonald's was in the wrong, but McDonald's kind of came out of it looking okay. You know, their reputation didn't really suffer that much.
Yeah, that's true.
But Liebig, she was ridiculed and became the butt of jokes for years.
Right. It makes you wonder how much public opinion actually affects how we understand these cases.
Oh, for sure. Public perception can be super powerful. It can really shape the narrative and even influence people's judgments. Sometimes it can even overshadow what actually happened in the courtroom.
That's crazy.
It is. It just shows how important it is to be able to think critically and, not just believe everything you hear.
Definitely. So what can we learn for all of this? It's pretty clear that the McDonald's coffee case is more than just a funny story about someone suing over spilled coffee.
It is. It's about so much more than that.
Like what?
It's about corporate responsibility and consumer safety, and how easily public perception can be manipulated.
It also reminds us that things aren't always as simple as they seem.
Exactly. There's always more to the story than what we see on the surface.
Right. We need to be curious and dig a little deeper and be willing to question the stories we're told.
Couldn't agree more.
And hopefully after this deep dive, people will think twice before making those hot coffee lawsuit jokes.
Yeah, maybe they'll realize that there's a real person behind that story.
And a really important message about corporate accountability.
For sure.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the McDonald's coffee case. Thanks for joining us.
It was a pleasure.
And until next time, stay curious.